going.
Yay.
We made it.
We're here.
Finally made it.
How long have we been planning this? At least 2 months.
Yeah.
At least 2 months. Since like the day after the table read, I think.
Yeah, it's a good few months ago.
Yeah. How are you?
Good.
Doing well.
Yeah.
Doing well.
Good way to start the day. So let's start with how you and I met and just the sort of, because I don't actually know exactly who it was that put you on to my post, but just the serendipity around that whole thing. How did you come to see, because we weren't connected on any Facebook level at all, and I put that post out for a table read, and who was it that put you in contact with me?
Me.
So I thought that you said that someone had passed it on to you and said, hey, this might be something.
No, I think I was just looking through Facebook and one of the pages came up with that, and as soon as I saw South African, I just resonated and went, oh, I can do that.
I'm South African.
I'm
Yeah,
South
sweet.
African. And contacted you. And the small world, even smaller world, is that Anthony Sharp, who we both know,
Mm-hmm.
Katrina and I met doing an offspring workshop together
Right.
a few years ago.
When you say offspring workshop, explain that to me. You've been handed the
Yeah.
torch.
Because it came through you, so
Yeah, that's I'm not sure exactly who runs it, but it's training directors using the Offspring sets and scripts.
Wow.
And so they bring in a bunch of actors, and so Sim and Anthony and I were actors on it. And we just worked with the directors, really just to give them a chance to try and push people around and get the coverage and see what happens.
So they were directors training.
Yeah.
And where were they? And a similar premise, they just are like booked into a workshop and that's their training, or were they through a school or something?
I'm not sure who runs it or how it came about, but yeah, it's multi-camera training. So it's working on the set as the directors would on an Offspring set. Yeah, it's quite fast turnaround television kind of style directing.
Did you find, because I've never worked in multi-camera setup, is that harder or easier?
For actors or directors?
for actors.
I think it's, I don't know. I mean, I think it's, you just got to cut to the chase faster.
Okay.
You know, because the fast turnaround television is exactly that. You've got to come in and know your lines and just be in the spot that they told you to be in, and not vary it and improvise terribly much.
But in terms of technique, you've probably, because you've got more coverage, right? You're not having to keep us contained.
Yeah, you probably don't have to repeat takes quite like you might.
Right. Because they can cut to and pick up and what have you. Yeah.
I had an interesting experience with that. I just shot a short, and I had wished that there was budget for multicam on that one, because we started off with establishing shots and wides. By the time they got to the close-ups, we were like, we've done the scene like sort of 50 times. We're like a bit wrung out. And yeah, I remember thinking, gee, if it was in the budget and they were skilled up in multicam, that would have been a really good experience from the actor's perspective.
Yeah. Because it's a whole other show shooting comedy too, right? Finding those. I mean, there's so much you can do in the editing room to pick up the beats. But like you said, if your actors are dialed out by the time it pushes in, you might almost be better to start in and work.
I wondered about that, but I thought I'll just let the director do her job.
That's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
I find it tough, especially when I'm working on something small and independent. And I'm looking at the camera and I'm like, that fucking camera's crooked, or whatever, and you're like,
hold your tongue.
Where's the point that I can step in and say, I'm not trying to be a dick or anything, but just want to throw the level on that a little bit. Okay, cool. And how was it working with Anthony? Anthony's great.
Lovely.
Yeah.
He's fun and real, and
Yeah, he's a trip. Yeah, he's got this super soft sort of open demeanor, and then like there's these little glimmers of ultra darkness and what have you, and you see some of his roles and he's like menacing.
Yeah.
Because then he's got that real something about his laugh when he's in a menacing role that's like fuck.
Convincing.
Right. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys mostly about, as you know, is your business, Little Green Olives. Was it? Have I got it right?
Almost.
Close. I said it wrong.
The sweet olives.
Sweet
We
olives.
are the sweet olives. Yeah.
Sweet olives.
Yeah.
And because it was interesting, because I didn't know, obviously, who you were before you contacted me, but only like the week before, Anthony had sent me a link to your business and said, this is a really great business. You should check this out. And then he walks in the room and he's like, that's the girl I was telling you about. So tell us all about that.
Where to start? I'm going to hand over to Sim for this. But yeah, it's clip library services essentially for actors.
Yeah. Katrina and I have a history together writing and performing together. And I think with the technological age where it's at, I started hearing, I think it was Mel McIntosh first, talking about clip libraries. And I thought it was just this incredibly empowering way for actors to generate work and keep updating their script and almost keep reinventing themselves or the industry's perception of them. And so we had me as the dummy shooting some scripts that I had written. And the photographer at the time and the DOP said, You've got a bit of an eye for direction. Why don't we kind of explore this? And then Kat and I have always had this long-term collaborative relationship. And I kind of shared the idea and said I think it'd be great and empowering for actors to be able to keep their work up, keep their profile updated. And, so we just started looking at really basic setup. We kept in touch with the casting directors. I'll let Kat elaborate maybe a bit more on that, but just kept finding out what's wanted, what's needed, and the common things were like just really good lighting and sound. We need to hear and see you really clearly, and currency. We need to know what you look like, how you work now, not 5 years ago, which kind of can happen with a reel, and it can be a bit of a catch-22 for people because they're not getting work, and yet maybe their profile is changing, but how to reflect that. And I kept thinking of drama school, and my most influential directors used to say, show me, don't tell me. And I thought, well, if they can capture it, it's right there, and then it makes the job easier too for the casting director.
Yeah, because it's such a hot topic too, right? And it's such the million-dollar question for actors now is, because you get so many different opinions from, a casting director, say like Greg Apps, who's, Anthony's just done his course and can't say enough good things about him, but he's like, if you don't have to come in, then it's your space, do whatever you want, go somewhere, give me a little hint of the character, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then I did a workshop with Anthony Mindell, is it? Anthony? Yes,
Mindell.
right?
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, brilliant. And I actually think, on a quick side note, that I saw him in a play in 2001 in Edinburgh. I can't be sure that it's him, but I was handing out flyers for this show and I got to chat to him and he was very kind, but I'm pretty sure it's him. But anyways, and then on his podcast, he was talking to one of the big casting directors for the CW network. I forget the guy's Rappaport, I think his last name is. And he does not want to see that at all. He's like, if I see you not against a backdrop, I feel like you've put more effort into setting up some kind of scene and you're gone. So it's really up to your agent to know who wants to see what, because I definitely like being able to be a little bit creative and get into it instead of just standing here in front of my window and what have you.
Yeah, I had also done Greg Apps's course.
Right.
And found it incredibly empowering. Yeah. Incredibly. So it's about the same time that Sim had just been shooting some stuff and people like Mel McIntosh and the Biz Book was setting up sort of as well. And there was definitely a feeling online with the forward-thinking casting directors like Greg and Mel that we're living in a day and age where the technology is available to us. Why wouldn't we use it? Right? So it's also, different agents will say do or don't go and make stuff on spec. And that's never going to change. But I think for beginning actors or actors that are not getting called in that often or for roles that they want to be called in for, you've got to do something. So
got
your
to.
choices are you go and stage a play yourself, a little bit of work in that.
Yeah.
Make a short film yourself, a little bit
ton
of
of
work
work
in
in
that.
that,
Or, volunteer to do student films and things like that, which everybody
Never
does
see the
anyway, but there's
footage.
no guarantee that it'll get released and you're working for nothing. There's still a
Yeah.
lot of time commitment. You can shoot stuff yourself, and that's really what it's coming down to is, there's nothing stopping you from setting up a camera, a setup in your own lounge room and shooting stuff yourself. And so we're sort of a step between that and spending a lot of money on
Real.
a show reel clip. So, a while ago, companies set up to make show reel material, and they'll charge a fortune, but they make it look like it's straight out of a TV set, something like that. So in a real context, somebody doesn't really know if it was from a web series or a TV show. So that can have its advantages, but it's a lot of money. And what we did when we sort of decided, there's something in this and we can help, because my background's very much as a filmmaker as well, is that, we started talking to the casting directors because we know quite a few of them, and we showed them what we set up for Sim and said, can you give us the feedback? What do you want to see? And consistently we don't need fancy anything. Don't worry about props. Don't worry about reverse shots or, any of those sort of big setup scenes or making it look like it's from a TV show. Don't try and trick us because we know. We just need to see the actor's face. We need a good reader. Don't cut to them because I'll get distracted by which person I like more, or I might end up casting somebody else to work against you. So just don't cut away. Let us see an actor work from start to finish in a scene and make sure it's only 30 to 90 seconds long. And that's kind of it, so long as it's nicely lit. And then to group it into easy to navigate libraries. So you put your drama stuff together, you put your comedy stuff together, you put your animation voices or your accents or your skills if you juggle or you sing or whatever else it is. And then you put your professional clips together. You still have a show reel.
Taken from what you've done.
Yeah, so you had a role as a guestie on Offspring. Great.
Let's see it.
Make sure that that's front and centre because that's your professional work. But what if you don't have recent professional work? What if your professional work's 15 years old and you don't look like that anymore? They don't want to see that old stuff. I mean, a history reel and a show reel is still valid, but the point is if you're not getting work or you want to push to be seen in a different light, then create some new stuff.
Yeah, you absolutely have to. And it's a funny thing with actors, not so much in Australia. I know in America they're a lot different where they kind of expect to be just getting paid straight out of the gate. But if you were an oil painter or a musician or a photographer or whatever, you would have to work on all this shit yourself for free to build a portfolio. You'd be sitting at home painting paintings, or you'd be learning how to play guitar. Then you'd be in a garage with your mates for however long until something happens. So this expectation that you can just walk into the, out of school and pick something up without, like maybe in places where there's a lot more work, but here, like you've got to keep pushing. I was at a seminar, and you might have seen this float through on Thursday afternoon with Lloyd and I forget her name. She comes from Morphe.
Lou Mitchell.
That's the one. Yeah, they had some. That was the hot topic, right? There must have been. We were in there for 2 hours, and that would have been 90% of the questions were about self tapes.
Really?
Yeah. And what do you expect, and what's good, and what's bad, and can I do this, and can I do that? And they had a bit of a difference in opinion. Nathan wasn't so fussed with seeing a myriad of self tapes, but Lou was keen as mustard. She was like, yes, just do something, act, make it simple. All right. He was like, I really like to just see the first 30 seconds of a show reel. I'm still a big fan of the show reel, which I thought was interesting. But he kind of backtracked unintentionally on that statement with another question. So it was hard to get a sense, but really they were the most common thread was, just show me that you can do it. You know, just show me your brand. Make sure that when you come in, you look like how you're supposed to be. So I'm not like, huh? And that's one of the things that I, as a headshot photographer, have to sort of mold people a little bit when they rock up and maybe they haven't had one for a while or what have you. And it's this whole thing. And I'm like, that's good if you're going to put that photo with a part. But let's just you're not going to reproduce this if you get a call from your agent and you're already out and about and they're like, hey, there's an audition. They really want to see you come in. You're not going to be like that. You need to be the most that you can find a commonality that you can represent, because they hate it. Outside of obviously doing something that's a bit character work or what have you. And so how have you found people's, because at the same time, funnily enough, a friend of mine had just, and maybe she's talking about you guys, was just off to Canada, and she's like, I'm putting together a clip reel, and that's what they really like out there. That's what my Canadian agent has told me that they would really like to see for me, 30 to 90 seconds of these different things that I can do. So I'm not just I can spread thin. And has that been working? Have you found that?
Just on that note, what was like a side effect bonus of shooting these was something I hadn't taken into account, but showing my agent the clips, she suddenly said, oh, I've never seen that side of your work. So then it gave her an opportunity to market me in a different way. That was really lovely. Or people seeking representation. It's a really nice. It's been really good. It's interesting you say that the Canadian climate's up with that as well.
Yeah, the Canadian climate, there's an interesting sort of trickling that I'm getting back from my friends who are out there about what they're looking for now, and there's a bit of sort of ethnocentric kickback where they don't want Aussies there anymore, and which I find really interesting considering how many Canadians are over here working and what have you, and I always thought that we had a little bit of that going on. But my friend found it really tough. For her agent wouldn't put her up for anything because there was all this kickback from casting directors, and she had to like go in there and champion for her. And so it's starting to turn a little bit. I know that they're trying to, with the free trade agreement, push to have open borders between Australia and Canada and Britain. But yeah, that was one of their notes was, the clip reels and what have you. And even, it's really, I've seen it also spread into major Hollywood actors who are sending in auditions on the fly, like Tom Holland. I mean, he sent in an iPhone video upwards like that in portrait mode of him doing backflips for Spider-Man, amongst other things. So, and same with the guy who plays the Winter Soldier. I forget what his name is. I always forget what his name is, but his was just in a window holding his phone like that.
Yeah. I think Damon Herriman got the Quentin Tarantino role. That was just from a quick self-tape.
So was the other fella in the film, and Jesus, I never remember his name, and I cannot remember the part, but he was in, I think it'll come back to me, but he even had to do his with like a self-recorder of his own voice and the whole thing, because he was on the 3rd season of True Detective. Right. So he was out there in the middle of the night recording this thing for Quentin. And he says that he's the first person to ever get cast, without actually meeting Quentin.
Yeah, I just did a commercial where I didn't even meet the director. I put in a self-tape and they cast me from that.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh, okay. Met the director on set, and he went, you know how you were improvising this? Can we do that again? Well, okay.
Sweet.
Yeah. Cool.
I'd like to see more TVCs go down that route, because it's the funny thing with TVCs, isn't it? Like, they can be... It's the bulk of what most people are auditioning for at this sort of the bottom tier in Melbourne. And
pays the bills better.
It pays the bills better, but I mean you can consume a lot of time going to auditions for TVCs for something that takes a minute. I've auditioned for a couple of TVCs from home, and man, that's the go.
It does save a lot of time. It really does.
Yeah. It's super simple. Yeah, and they give you a little bit of direction, but really the TVC, you're getting cast on what's happening here.
Exactly, and that's a lot about what do you look like right now? What's your hair look like right now?
Yeah. And that's it comes back to being real when you walk into the room. And So what do you guys focus on? Like from your feedback from casting directors, what are the archetypes that they want to see the most for guys and girls?
I think the two things, like if you're just going to do two scenes, for example, it's we try to encourage people to go, what's your go-to casting? And this is Greg Apps' point of view. What's the go-to role that someone's going to just go, oh, we need one of them? For me, it's often mum.
Right.
You know, mum, teacher, neighbour, friendly next door neighbour, klutzy, somebody, best friend, you know, like, so make sure you've got a role that's like that. Don't try and be the high-powered lawyer, because you're probably not going to get walked into that kind of an audition. Yeah. So what's your go-to casting? So that's one thing. And then what else is there about you that people maybe don't know so much?
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah. So what's the contrast?
Or the out of the box.
Yeah, we call it out of the box.
Surprise out of the box choice.
Yeah.
Where you wouldn't ordinarily be cast, but you actually resonate with that genre and want to showcase it. So or more I'll take my more have a sip. A more broad stroke would be maybe, you know, comedy and drama. And depending on how much time they have with us, we try and encourage them to do as many scenes as they can. One guy who was terrific, we just worked with, has in spades talent and work ethic, just a joy to be with in the room. And he chose pieces. I think we ended up doing 3 scenes, and he did Australian, UK and US accent. So we got to cover a broad range, and he's also got, you know, UK citizenship, and so he was thinking quite broadly, and it was a great opportunity for him to kind of do the same scenes but with
so he came in saying, I want to put down a US clip. So we did that, and we did it, you know, however many times till we feel happy from start to finish you've got that covered. And then we said, well, since Australian accent's your native accent, let's do that same scene in an Aussie accent. So we do that a few times, and then we went back to the US accent, because it's sort of playing with those different aspects of yourself, especially when you go into an accent mode. You tend to bring something to it when you revisit your own self and then revisit the clip. It brings a new sort of real level. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Give me an example of how you saw that. Does that make sense?
What do you mean there, Mavis? Well, what I mean is, no, I think, okay, so you adopt an American accent, and he did this particular scene, and you fall into, not a cliche, but your accent changes your persona, particularly with an American, right? Yeah. It's a lot more confident. It's a lot more out there and sort of gregarious, I suppose.
And that waterfall rhythm sort of gets into you a
so when you
too.
do the scene, you're bringing that accent to it, and it's quite quite punchy, forward, if you like. And then when you drop back into the Australian thing, you kind of, I don't know, you bring it in, it's grassy or root, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's a little more laid back, you know, for want of a better description. And then, then you connect with the words in the scene in a different way, because there's something inside of you that is a bit more real now. Yeah. You're not trying to put the scene down as an Aussie, right? Even though actually it was quite compelling and wonderful to see him do that scene as an Aussie. Then you go back to the American accent, and you're not maybe quite as default American. Does that make sense?
Okay,
it's more real.
Yeah, it's a way of getting the text into on
and that was
layers.
just that case with him on that day. That's not necessarily going to work for everybody, but it was just interesting to see. So he actually got a whole lot of material out of it, because his US scene is great, and that's there, and then he's got the Aussie version. And the thing about these clips too, which we didn't say before, is you're not necessarily putting them all up there front and centre and publicly accessible. They're usually got a password on them, or it's a private link that your agent might have, or that you send to the casting directors and say, here's the clip library and my password for all of the clips is blah. And then they can just access whichever they need at the time.
Yeah, up to your agent. It's in their hands then, and they be strategic with how they drip feed these little bits of gold. Yeah.
The other interesting thing was Kat mentioned it earlier about no cutaways that the casting directors had said, how much a part of acting listening is, and how you miss that when you cut to the other actor in traditional film or TV, and giving the actors the opportunity to actually just sit in the entire scene with the camera locked off on them has been really interesting. You get that beautiful listening quality that you normally don't see.
I think that's a really, you hit the, like, that's something that I got pulled on in a workshop with Kriv Stenders recently. Excuse me. It was a hard scene, and it was a scene that Richard Roxburgh plays. So, and he is that character, right? Like, he always plays that kind of pernicious, fucking evil kind of fella. You know what I mean? And there's and I'm a different kettle altogether, and so I wanted to play it like I wanted to play it, and he wanted me to play it like it is in the film. So I'm trying to do this thing, but trying to remold everything on the spot. And then I've got this guy who's got a big monologue, and he's just like this with the camera on me, and he's like, "I don't believe you." And I'm like, "Well, fuck." That's one of the hardest things to do when you're watching it back and you're not going to what that person's saying for it to then land on you, and you're just watching someone stare at someone listening. Like, it's really hard because you would never see someone listen for a whole minute, you know, in a two-hander.
Yeah.
And it is like, how do I listen, and how do I still give everyone enough without doing too much or not enough? It's tough.
And
it's really tough.
A part of the research as well for us was, I mean, as a filmmaker, I've spoken to a lot of other directors and producers too about what they want to see. And that was feedback from them is like, I'd rather watch a really dodgy self-tape where you don't cut away, because in any scene, whether it's a piece of professional work or whether it's a fully produced showreel scene, how do I know that it didn't take them 40,000 takes to build that scene?
Right.
You know,
when
that they always got the first line and then they forgot it, or that they were really flat the whole way through and then they had to work, and take 40 was the one that had the life on that line but not this one, and they built in the edit a pause or a beat here that didn't happen on the day. You know, because you can do that. Of course you can. With editing you can change a lot about someone's performance. So that was a big thing. Then I thought, yeah, that's interesting, because certainly as a filmmaker, I look at that as well. You build certain performances out of your favourite takes and your favourite moments.
That's a great note. And they said that in this seminar too. They said, guys, one thing, 3 takes. Don't do 20 takes when you're at home doing a self-tape. You'll fuck yourself up. Just give us the first couple out of the bag. If you're going to give me 2, make sure they're vastly different. Yeah. Don't give me variations. I don't know. There was so many hands going up, and I thought I might just listen for this hour and a half. But someone, actually, a fella I took character shots of a couple of years ago happened to be sitting next to me in the class, and he's sent me a couple of scenes he had for an audition yesterday, and he had one with, he was supposed to be, what's your man's name from Moby Dick with the chopped off leg? What's the Abram?
Yeah.
Abe. Captain. Fucking that guy.
That guy. Yeah.
It's weird. It's a commercial audition, but they've got him doing a segment from Moby Dick. But he had like a sailor's double-breasted jacket on and a beanie, and then one without. And I said, he was asking me for my notes. I'm like, I'm not really sure that I'm the guy to be giving you notes, but my notes would be, as a photographer, I would do the close-up without the beanie, and I would keep it super, super still. And if you want to give them something different, do a mid-shot, put the beanie back on, and you can have a little bit more movement. You're supposed to be in a rowboat like that. So I wonder if they would deem a look change for the same thing big enough. If the performance was slightly similar, but you showed them a whole, like for example, I wasn't too precious about my beard, so I gave it to them one with and one without. I mean, it changes your face completely. Or you tied your hair back or something like that. Like if I've got hair down or tied back, it's a whole other show. I wonder if that's enough of a change, if it's similar. What do you think?
I guess it depends on what they're looking for in you. You know, you give your best take, great.
Yeah.
But then you might be going, oh, maybe they want it to be more something. I could push it in this direction. So I think it's just whatever you were saying that they were saying on the night, as long as it's different enough or gives something another layer that's worth it. Otherwise, don't waste my time, make me watch something that I don't have to. Just, if you want to see in a wide shot, just cut to the wide shot at the end. I don't know what they said at that seminar. Did they say at the end that you should do the, oh, hi, my name's blah, in a wider shot and do a turnaround and all that sort of stuff? Or
they didn't get into it too much, but someone did mention that one agency. That's right. So Nathan, he doesn't want chats. Like when I auditioned for him recently, it was my first official dialogue-driven audition for a TV show in 3 fucking years. And he wasn't there, but his girls were there, and they didn't ask for chats at all. There was, I barely even think there was an introduction. It's that video capture that they have. They showed us the back end of casting networks and how that they conduct an audition and what they see, what they don't see, how important it is to have your skills labeled and be very specific about your skills. She used an example of looking for actors who are Micronesian, and what she said was, every actor's got a tan. You're not fucking Micronesian just because you've been out in the sun. Be specific, because when they're looking for specificity in their casting, which and it's not a broad stroke, that can really help you stand out. But so Nathan doesn't care about chats to camera, whereas Mitchell was all about them. I definitely think one of the things I learned at TAFTA was to always do it last.
Do it
at the end once you've got your goods out and all the rest of it, But no mention of the twirl and the hands and that. I mean, you've noticed yourself. Sometimes it's attached to the brief and sometimes it isn't. So I guess they know how they're going to shoot it and whether they want it or not. So how long have you guys been running that?
Nearly a year, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we started.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, earlier this year.
Nice.
And we've evolved where we're shooting and things like that. So we've just recently spoken to the wonderful team at 16th Street.
Oh, great.
And we're going to be shooting there.
So what would the setup be then? Is that's going to be like just a backdrop type situation? Why shoot there as opposed to just to bring it out of the house or to proximity to students or a bit of both?
All of the above, yeah. Well, technically, and reducing the work in post, interior is preferable, but we do have different packages where they can shoot.
Okay.
On a location of their choice, and we have another house in St Kilda that's available. But we're just going for the simplicity so that they become the focus, and there's nothing detracting from the performance and what they look like, really. And so the camera's pretty much locked off with some variation, but it's just really simple. And again, had the conversations with casting directors and they've said, yep, less is more. Rather that than you trying to look like you've set up that you're on set when you're not. So it just gives them a really clean canvas and you're the focus. So.
And the other thing for us too was what 16th Street can offer us is they've got all the gear there. So our focus then is on working with the actor to find appropriate material, to rehearse with them if they want that, to spend that time on the day. And
not so tech driven.
Yeah, it's not sort of about all the bells and whistles or whatever. I mean, we certainly spend a bit of time on making it look nice, so it's flattering and that the sound is good for both the actor and the reader, even though the reader's not on camera. It's a nice, clear, easy to listen to
you don't
piece
want that
of
distant sound
footage.
that's all echoey.
No, it's
or
awful.
Right next to the mic and you're on the other side of the mic.
Yeah, it
so
doesn't
they're super
overbear.
loud.
Yeah. And so it's just nice and easy really to have sort of a neutral space that's a bit bigger. There's a waiting area, all that sort of stuff. But as Tim said, we offer different packages. So we have one day a month where people can just sort of walk into. You just book a slot. You've got 45 minutes on camera and do 1 or 2 scenes, and you do most of the preparation yourself. Then you just kind of rock up and we work with you on the day. And then we also support people in once it's all packaged, to get it onto a Vimeo clip library. If they don't have one, we can set it up.
Oh, that's great.
And we know like how casting networks need to have it packaged in a certain way with no idents, and other things like Showcast or whatever, all the different platforms have slightly different variations of maximum duration and certain bit rates and sizes of the files, so we can master it all to suit all the different platforms. So that's one of the things, we take that off the actor's hands so they don't go, oh my God, what do I do?
Because it's a fucking, it's a total
it's a nightmare.
Around it.
Yeah. And then in terms of other packages, we can also do sort of bespoke filming. So if you go, no, I want it to look like it's straight out of whatever show, Offspring or something, then we can absolutely set that up, but it costs more. So what do you want from it by doing that? Sometimes it is worth it. Sometimes it's worth having a variety on your demo reel. Here's a bit of Shakespeare, here's some comedy stuff, here's my US accent, and here's something that looks like it might have been from a real show.
Yeah. So
you might choose to do a range,
So if someone wanted to do like a 2.5 minute show reel clip, you guys would be doing that too. Yeah, that's cool.
And the other thing is our focus is the personalised approach. So it's kind of mentoring along the way. And we also use and support local writers. I've written for our first couple of clients, and just really kind of taking a community approach towards it, really supporting and nurturing them kind of from go to woe.
I think that's super important. The very first showreel scene that I ever did, I was very, very lucky. No, actually, it wasn't the first. The first one I did was fucking appalling, and it was.
They always are.
This woman, unfortunately, I can't remember her name, but I wouldn't publicly shame her. But she was straight out of Actors Studio in New York, and she had moved to Australia, and she set up this acting school in Perth, and it was like, I can't even tell you how much it was. I ended up organising a deal where I was going to do her headshots, and I didn't have to pay for the class, but it was like 9 weeks of rehearsing the same scene to then shoot it at the end of those 9 weeks. It was insane, and it was terrible. Her notes, there was no acting technique, there was no nothing. It was just more, less, And so then I showed that to my now acting coach Miles Pollard when I was doing his workshop in Perth, and he was like, I don't know what's happening, and then out of the goodness of his heart, he shot a showreel scene for me, super, super cheap. And that was a great experience because he's, an incredible director and actor, but there are a lot of services out there. They're not directors. They know how to work the tech, but they don't know how to give you notes on the day. And that's probably the more important than anything else, because if you're not good at self-directing and managing and being, because you don't want to have to be that self-aware either. You want to be able to just do everything. And I would say the one thing that Miles does better than anyone else that I've worked with, and I haven't seen a lot of it, is side coaching. And that's just coming in right at that moment. Stay there, stay in it, and just not cut. Okay, what do we need here? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I will say that, and no, that was one thing that I felt like Creve could have done in his workshop, is he would break momentum, and I thought was really strange. And I was like, you can just come in, man, keep that camera on me, talk me into it, And that's a real skill. Yeah. If you've got that as a director. I watched this incredible behind the scenes of The Irishman yesterday. Oh, okay. And that's floating around online at the moment. And Marty's there with fucking Robert De Niro and Al Pacino and Joe Pesci in a scene together, you know what I mean? And he's like, it's very soft, subtle, and they're like, oh yeah, it was just awesome to watch. And then they're in a close up, and he's like in the chair behind them, like peering in and watching, and then he's watching on the monitor, and his movements are exactly what old mate's doing on the screen. They're just they are so tuned into the rhythm. Obviously, they've been working together for 40 years, but it's a little different. But I just like the way that he was in there, just chatting softly, and I
think it's I think coming from both of us from an actor's background, you really kind of get that perspective. And, you know, just drawing on what we bring to it, situation dependent. But for example, we've worked with people that I've just started to see a lot of tension coming into the jaw. We'll go off, just really do some release stuff, get them running, jog in, right straight in. And they've kind of dropped back into that kind of body awareness rather than, am I doing it right? And just kind of, constantly being that support to really, I think I speak for both of us, just to get them to feel so at ease that the work just comes through, and creating that warm, supportive environment for them to feel like nothing else is in the way that we usually think about as actors. Am I doing it right? Do they like me? Is this sound, you know, that stuff that head talk that gets in the way of the actual work. We do our best to just, and the feedback's been that, you know, they use words like fun and supportive and warm, and we feel that too. It's a conversation. It's a really mutual exchange.
And I think also, because I've also worked as both an actor and a director, and I've learned never to try and do them at the same time, because they are different headspaces. So what we're trying to do is remove that self-judgment and self-awareness. Am I doing it right? Does it come across okay? And taking that responsibility away. So some people like a bit of feedback, and some people are like, no, I just want to walk in and do it 4 times and leave and don't want to discuss it. Except that we found that most people really want that feedback, even if they even if they say they don't really need any feedback. I'm kind of cool. Everybody really does respond to it, and the thing about working with us is you can do it 40 times. We're only going to use the one that really resonates and really works, you know, or you can use 3 different takes for different purposes. This one maybe is a very funny interpretation of quite a serious scene, and that might be worth it too. But it's for us, it's really just about giving the actor the support that they need, because, you know, there are so many questions. I get it so often with, you know, friends or family members saying, oh, my niece wants to be an actor, can she call you and ask your advice? And it's always the same sort of questions too, of how do I get an agent? How do I get my first job? How do these sort of things work? Should I be on the different, you know, should I be on Showcast or Star Now? What's the difference between the two of them? Should I be an Actors Equity member? You know, how do you get to pay reduced actors' equity fees? There's all sorts of things that we kind of look at from a big picture. So we look at, where's the actor at? Why are you putting a clip down? What do you want from it? And we're looking at that end goal as well, and trying to help them move from wherever they're at to getting some more work, really, ultimately.
Do you, like for myself, sometimes I will talk to an actor's agent about specifically what that agent wants to see out of their headshot shoot. Do you guys chat with the agents and go, what, you know, especially if they're young and they don't really know or whatever?
Yeah, so far we haven't. A lot of people coming through either are wanting to move away from their agent and get a new one, or they're agentless and they're wanting to find an agent. Yeah. But we have spoken, in the case of Sim's agent, we've spoken to her about what she likes. So, I think as we continue, I mean, we're still sort of ramping up and whatever. But, we'd love to hear more from the agents themselves about what they're looking for. But if someone has an agent, we do certainly say, have a discussion with your agent first about what they want from you, what's going to help them.
It's a really difficult, I've, in my experience, have found that a difficult conversation too, as to whether your agent is doing the right thing by you or doing the right thing by their agency too. And you have to, because they're, you know, I'll give you an example. My former agent refused to put me up for anything that was was in a leading or any television kind of capacity, because I didn't have NIDA and I didn't have 16th Street. And she told me that flat out. And then in this casting workshop with 2 people that I've now auditioned for with my new agent, so they're like, I don't give a shit about your training. Let me see some work. The work's good. I'll get you in. And that was, and I was like, and she said to me, because I don't want to send anyone out from this company who isn't trained. And I was like, I think you're missing a beat there.
A lot of actors are not trained.
Not
they
trained,
get a lot of
more
work.
and more and more. You know, it was really so. It's that age-old thing of following your gut, but also listening to, and then finding out like it's a really, really hard one, especially when the industry is pulling back financially and it's getting swamped, and that the whole model is changing, where you know a car commercial is only worth $4,000 as opposed to the 25 that it was even just 4 years ago. You know, so agents like have to really, and some of them are handling it and evolving, and some aren't.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think some are moving and adapting, and some are getting stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this
is the way we used to do things, and it's the way we'll always do things. But you know, that's never really changed. The industry's always moved and adapted, and
yeah, that's part of it, isn't it? I've always, as someone who came into acting late, you look for those little nuggets that keep you propelled and keep you going, you know. And one guy I listened to was saying, you know, it's a marathon. You know, what will separate you from the rest is just by staying the course.
The fact that you're still standing.
That you're still standing, yeah, because most people will fall away unless they get a snag straight away.
Yeah.
You know, some people get super, super lucky. Most don't, you know. And how many actors you've seen, like you'll see them as something big, like Josh Brolin, for example. You know, all of a sudden he was in everything. But you go back, he was in Goonies. And I don't know too many people that remember he was in Goonies. And then Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth Shue in the mid-90s. Like, and all of a sudden, you know, he had 25 years of hard graft. And then all of a sudden he's a hot ticket.
I'm thinking of Jeffrey Rush as an overnight success when
Right.
he'd spent decades at the South Australian Theatre Company, you know, treading boards. And
I watched this incredible show, and you'll start to see a recurring theme here that I'm terrible with fucking names. So I watched it yesterday or something. It's a new show on Netflix, and it's goes into the production side of some of the biggest hits like Ghostbusters and Die Hard and Dirty Dancing, and how hard it was to get them made and who made them. And it doesn't talk to the actors, it talks to all the production side of things. But we watched the one on Die Hard, and they were talking about Alan Rickman. And, you know, he's another fella. I don't think he started acting until he was in his late 30s, you know, and he was doing a lot of Broadway and what have you. And somehow he snags this role in Die Hard, which was like slated from the beginning is going to be a total bomb, because Bruce Willis was a comedic sitcom actor, and who the fuck gives a shit about him trying to save the world? But do you remember, have you seen
Alan Rickman as the villain?
Yeah, Hans Gruber.
Brilliant, yeah.
At the end, he drops him off the building, and you see him falling slowly like that. Well, they were talking to the stunties in this, and he was actually on a 40-foot like sound stage falling onto a mat, and they had him hanging like this. And the lead stunt coordinator said, "Okay, on 3, we're gonna let you go." And then the camera's over the top looking at him like that. He's like, sweet, let's practice it up. And then he's like,
Yeah.
and they let him go on 1. He's like, so that fear you see in his eyes is real. But it looks, he's like, so good, because you would be, no matter how good you are, like if that's your first big stunt at 40, you know, like we're going to be really tense for that number 3. And I thought, that's a sweet little, yeah. And it was, they got into Dirty Dancing, which was really, I was never a massive fan of Dirty Dancing. All my sisters were.
Totes.
But like the big scene where Patrick Swayze is jumping off the stage, like he had to do it like 40 times, and his whole knee was ruined from football.
Yeah.
And you see the behind the scenes footage of him going up to direct, and he's like, please have everything right, because I'm going to fucking fall over in a sec. Yeah, it was really interesting. And the tension between the two of them, and they had to like really nut it out, because they'd worked on Red Dawn together, and they hated each other and all this. And Billy Zane was originally pegged for that role.
Yes.
And you see his footage of him dancing.
And you realise why he didn't get it.
Terrible and disgusting too. Like just real creep vibe. And then of course you see Patrick Swayze coming in, who's like a ballet dancer. He was incredible. Yeah. So what's next? What's happening in the writing and directing and acting world? I see you've got 2 shorts out this year. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, alongside of things like this, yes. Always got my hand dirty in a few different pies.
You have to.
Yeah, so I just directed a short that's sort of doing the rounds of the film festival circuit at the moment. That was a very experimental kind of a thing. It's a 20-minute monologue, which, the girl who wrote it, Kerry Drum, I'm a massive fan of her writing, and she asked me to direct it, and I kind of went, "Oh, Kerry, it's a monologue. No one wants to see a monologue on film."
How do you find
but
the
it's such a beautiful piece of writing, and we both wanted to work with Lee McClanahan as the actor, and so we went ahead.
I crossed paths with her somewhere before. Actually, I was looking
she's
at
fabulous. So she's been through our Olives process. We just mastered some stuff for Lee. But yeah, that was, I've made a lot of shorts in my life. But this was, just one day shoot, rehearsal the day before, 1 day shoot, crew of 3, and I've edited it all myself. There's no music. It's just 100% about the performance and the writing. And it's a really tough piece of writing. So it was quite a rewarding film, a tough one to get into film festivals when it's that long. And then the other one I'm producing, so it's another tough film actually, which is strange for me. Oh, so my background as a filmmaker has been making animation and family films, funny films, comedies, silly things, and that's been sort of where I've come from. But that one was, just because it was a strong piece of writing. And then this other one is a filmmaker friend of mine who I'd worked with as an actor, actually, Tatiana Doroshenko, and I've always just admired her style and her approach. She has quite an incredible way of bringing out poetry out of very dark stuff. So I'm producing a film for her that is a true story from St Kilda's dark past about a pedophile network that operated around a toilet block outside of Luna Park. So we've got lead kid cast, adult themes, violence, stunts, night exterior shoots, and child permit challenges.
And have you're
and that's shot now. We're in post. We're in post. So that's sort of an ongoing thing. None of us are getting paid. We're just doing it because it's such a beautiful script that she and another guy, David Markin, wrote. And it just needed to be made. And I sort of said to her, if you need a hand with your permits or something, turned into producing it with another guy, Bernie Clifford. So that's in post. And then, I don't know, always doing other bits and pieces. I won't go into them all.
The producing thing is a really hard one too, because that's probably where short films with no budget can fall down the most, is because you can generally get your hands on a good DOP who's building up his stuff and a good group of actors. But getting someone to produce a no budget film with that specific skill set is tough. I mean, I went through a bunch trying to make mine, and I ended up having to do it myself.
The only reason I started producing was because I was looking for a producer, and I found no one else picks up the phone faster than you do or negotiates harder 100%. To save the dollars than you do when it's your own work. So I very rarely produce for other people, actually, but kind of
if it's good, if there's something, and that's the other thing that I've spoken a lot with people on the couch or on the chair, and obviously I have experienced this for years when I was in high fashion as well, is if you're going to put your hand up, if I ask you and you're going to come along and do it, treat it like a paid thing.
Commit to it.
If you can't, and I get it, and there's no hard feelings, don't do it. Because I'm going to treat you like someone who's being paid, because I'm working just as hard.
Yeah, certainly from a producer's point of view with crew, I'll always say, look, can you commit to whatever? There's no money, or there's a $20 a day or something pathetic, and we'll feed you well, and I promise it'll get out there. But if you get paid work, that's fine. Totally accept that you'll need to take that, and I get that. But can you help us find someone to replace you? If you're prepared to commit to helping me do that, then 2 days before a shoot, I'm kind of okay that you need to go and pay. But if it's the producer, it's a bit harder. You can't have a producer pull out halfway through because they got a paid gig somewhere else. You're still going to make it.
Yeah.
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 And it's hard. It is hard to find the right person, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's sort of a combination. It's one of the reasons I love still also acting is you meet other people on set in a great way, and you tend to end up working on each other's stuff.
Yes, you do. Yeah. And this has been really, really great for that too.
Yeah.
You know, just everyone's got a little, because most people who are sitting down are working on something. You know, like I say this a lot, and I'll continue to say this, but one of the things that I hope for this, you know, there's a couple of things you need to tick off whenever you're, and I'll be specific about podcasting, is know your audience. Don't plan this goal of getting 1 million listeners. Look for 1,000 listeners. But don't go into it with not only what can I get from this podcast, what can I give back? And you will get those 1,000, you know, exponentially quicker than if you were just looking for what I can do for me. And one of the things that I ultimately would love to see happen with this podcast is it be a community testing zone for ideas and scripts and what have you, so that if I'm a producer somewhere and I'm looking for my next project, someone goes, hey, there's a podcast called Big Wonder, and they're talking to these independent writers and directors who are floating their ideas. I heard this episode the other day, and this guy was talking about such and such and such. Go and listen, and then all the contact details are there, so it becomes this kind of platform because there's not that I really know of. Everyone's really scared of like talking about their ideas, yet every writing book you pick up says don't be. Talk about it as much as you fucking can, because you need to know if it works. People want to listen to it.
I think it's fair to say you might think about your timing as to when it's ready to be shared.
Yeah. For sure.
And who you're sharing it with.
It needs to be shared. Yeah. Everything that I've read has said, if you think that someone is going to steal your idea at this level, you're crazy. They got their own shit happening. Just get it out there. Stop people in fucking the line at the cafe and say, I'm just going to run a log line by you. What do you think? Would you go and watch this? You know? I think I took that on board a lot. And one of the things one of my guests said, which really, really I thought was a great sort of little nugget of wisdom from someone who's been in it for 20 years. And I was telling him about how you sort of floated into my neck of the woods and came to the read, and then you had just been narrating this book, and just all these little things that kept lining up. And then my wife's best friend lives with a guy who, when he's not an accountant, he works on the board of an organization that helps rangers. Would you believe? So I'm there with him till 2 a.m. on Friday night, talking about his work in the Kruger National Park and in Tibet and in Sudan and Kenya with all these different rangers and what have you, which my film was all about rangers. And so he's going to now read the film. And so what this guy said to me is, when these little things are happening, when you're talking about your project, it's a pretty good sign that it's going to happen.
Serendipitous, yeah, definitely.
But when there's nothing, walk away. You know, you're going to put a lot of energy into something that it's just the universe is not telling you that it's going to fly. So,
So many levels, weren't there, on that project?
Yeah.
Which we started off with, and I think I segued, but I had just finished narrating an audiobook set in South Africa around the rhino trade of illegal ivory and the poachers. And then we found ourselves at Josh's table read.
Yeah, and the author of the book's last name is the same as the title. And then, you know, my lead character, who's based off, his name is my best friend's name, is actually Christopher Ryan, which is the name of an SAS soldier's pseudonym for the books that he wrote about being in. So then the writer of Stringy Bark, the Ned Kelly film that I did, he came along and he was in the military. And he's like, you can't use that name. But that's really interesting that was the name that you chose of an actual SAS fellow, and your character's an SAS guy and what have you. And then speaking to this guy, he's actually a friend of his is in town, is making a mini series about the atrocities in Afghanistan and what have you, and has had a lot of exposure in that world. So hopefully we'll sit down and have a chat.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then you put me in touch. So another crazy thing, and I'm sitting there with like my 10th draft, and I'm like, okay, I feel like it's as tight as I can get it. I don't know how to get this in the eyes of someone who might be able to tell me
where
yes,
to
it's
next.
good.
Yeah.
Yes, it can be made. This is how you do it, or I would like to make it. And you just send me a note out of nowhere. Oh, hey, do you know this woman, Julia Berg? I should put you in touch with her. She's a producer that sort of incubates writers and then puts them in touch with producers who might want to make a film. And she's been great. Got my next class with her next Monday, and
Yay.
I'm taking all of her notes. And
Awesome.
yeah, she was really great. She was like, because it was interesting, because she's like, all your intentions for the film are right, that it should be a mixed race South African woman who becomes the hero. We don't start with her as the hero, but right now you start the film with Tom. That's the first person I see, so I think it's about him. So it's a great note. Just take that off, that whole scene, start it with her, find out what the theme is for her, show me that. So now the intro of the story is her out with a bunch of rangers, taking the snare off a lion, teaching them how to do it and what have you. So
Nice.
It's that high intensity of a lion. Like, it's not like taking the snare off an antelope.
Yeah, right.
You know, and you get a sense of her place in the community and what have you, which I borrowed from a video on YouTube. And it was just really interesting. So now it starts with this really high intensity scene of her doing what they do a lot of in the park. The snares are crazy.
Yeah.
And then goes to Tom. I
Yeah,
never would have
great.
seen that. you
And
know.
I'm still going to connect you with Tony, I think, the writer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of resonance there. Yeah, so I came to find Julia when I was writing. I've been writing my first feature. Mine's a bit too early to start throwing ideas around in this because it's still kind of percolating. But that's been really interesting exercise. I'm learning heaps.
Did you actually work with Julia or no? You just
Yes, well, I
Okay.
had a couple of sessions.
And what did she? I mean, what did
Plot
you have
points.
to present to her? And
Um,
you had like a log line or just a sort of
no, I kind of had a logline work in progress,
treatment? Mhm.
and it needed distillation and it needed technique.
Same.
Because I'd never written for feature.
Mhm.
So she gave some really good points and we kind of broke it up and chunked it. And so I walked away with a kind of, I think she said traditionally it's a 5-act structure, but let's go with 3. And that worked really well for the premise and what we were doing. And so I've just been working on it a lot independently, and I've just connected with an incredible Australian writer for screen, and she lectures as well, and she's kind of, I guess, mentoring, and so that's really exciting. And this year's been, for me, short films. I've done quite a few short films with graduating students from Deakin, RMIT and VCA,
Mhm.
and just doing the audition circuit. But it's been really refreshing doing the Olives because I've really enjoyed, you spoke before, it's a different hat, and just taking that one off, coming from the actor's understanding, but being the support and taking more of the directorial kind of role has been really refreshing. And it's just so wonderful seeing someone and supporting their journey and kind of not being in the way, and just kind of seeing where they want to go and how to support them to get there. And
we're meeting amazing people.
oh, they're incredible.
Yeah.
This is the thing, like you spoke about.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, on that note before, like about keeping your cards to your chest versus sharing knowledge and experience, I was part of a filmmaker group 30 years ago with Mel Coombs, a local Oscar-winning producer, and Mel said to us at the time, I think she might have even orchestrated getting us together, saying, I want to have a brunch or a lunch or a dinner or something with all of us once a month, and you share everything that you know. And this is before the internet. You share everything you know, every opportunity you've heard of, every producer that's looking for something, every idea, every talented actor you've come across, just share it. And her point of view was, because if we share our knowledge, we all grow stronger.
Yeah.
But if we all keep our cards to the chest, we're all fighting really hard to find those little nuggets. Like that opportunity I heard about might not be right for me, but it might be right for you.
Yeah.
And everything comes full circle.
It sure does.
And that was a real sort of eye-opener. I was obviously particularly young back then. But it really changed my perspective. I thought, she's right. And we're still doing that.
Yeah. I was just going to add to that. it's in the fetal stage of development, but I've started sharing with Kat in light of the mental health situation, particularly of our industry, creating some kind of forum where actors get together and maybe sharing that part of I missed out on this gig, I didn't get this gig, kind of letting that be heard, but then channeling and using that to create something and network, so that it kind of shows people that they can move through it and use that. I was in a altercation, let's call it, the other day with, would you believe, a grandparent.
Do tell.
Outside my children's school, and I was so verbally abused, and it was really confronting, and it sparked this like visceral fire in me that I thought was long gone, and I felt like I had to take a stand for women being spoken to the most heinous language, and a man, and quite challenging seeing someone of that age. Not that it's okay for anyone to speak to another human being like that, but of that age speaking with this kind of language. Anyway, I sort of stepped.
An example of the language.
Oh. I think it'll take me right back there. I don't want to go back. But my takeaway was, wow, that energy that is so powerful that we have as storytellers can either be used for destruction or creation. And I thought so many of my colleagues talk about their self-worth being reflected whether they got the gig or not, or the phone rang or not. And it was like,
being shortlisted and then
yes, that old chestnut, and kind of going, all right, let's create a space where that can happen. You can feel heard, but then what do we do with that? Rather than feeling victimized or bitter or resentful towards the industry or your agent, how do we kind of create a forward momentum with that energy and use it for something creative? Network with other people maybe in the same boat, but suddenly you're going to get a short together. Suddenly you're going to shoot some clip libraries, and that really excites me. I think it's really how we use it that counts in the end.
Yeah, and it's not. I was thinking about this the other day, and some of this is my own words, and some of this is something that one of these channels that I subscribe to is London Real, a guy called Brian Rose. He was a MIT graduate who went onto the Wall Street and then became a heroin addict, and then transformed his life, and now he runs this business development school in London. But he also has this incredible podcast video channel where he talks to some of the most innovative, healthy people on the planet. And one of his guests said one of the things that's missing from school is that no one is teaching kids how to learn, only what to learn. And one thing that I've learned as an adult is no one is teaching you that you have emotional choice. So when you don't get that part, you can choose to be okay with it. You don't have to choose to be upset. And that was a lesson that I learned when I was about 32 through a life coach. Was like, and I was going through a breakup. She's like, breakups are sad and everything, but you can choose to hold on to it, yeah, or you can choose. You have the power of choice. Just because movies and romance novels and all this kind of stuff tell you that you should be stressed, want to slit your wrists, that's not real. It might be great for storytelling, but that's not life. And no one's teaching adults or anyone, as far as I'm aware, unless you're part of that sort of already exposed network that is, that you just make a different choice, And so I was lucky, I guess, that when I came into, because I was always terrified of acting. It wasn't like I woke up at 32 and said, I want to be an actor. I've been wanting to be an actor since I was 6. And I didn't do it till I was 33 because of fear. And it wasn't until because of what I was taught in these sessions that I could make a choice to not be riddled with panic and fear and anxiety before an audition, what have you, even though I was for the first
the quivering lip
20,
well done it.
And then listening to, and then so, but I came to it with a little bit of a foundation of intellect around navigating these like fearful areas that could break you, and I've only ever had one teacher that sort of nearly get me to that place where he just fucking destroyed me at the beginning of the class, and it took me the whole class. And if I had been 20 and I had copped that, I would never have come back to class.
Break you.
But because I was 34, 35, I went to him straight afterwards and said, do you do private sessions? Can I have a class? And that's the distinction. That was only because someone taught me that I could choose to handle that differently as opposed to just let it consume you.
I'm going to give a little shout out to something else I work on. One of the sort of many things that I do is corporate media, and I do a little bit of work with Monash University, and we have very popular online courses in mindfulness.
Great.
Because I've worked on the courses now for 4 or 5 years, I've seen the repeated learner feedback and the incredible sort of empowering nature of mindfulness training, which a lot of people go, oh yeah, whatever. But I highly recommend, especially for actors, it has that kind of, it helps you to acknowledge pain, rejection, difficult situation, and it's not about accepting a situation that's bad. You know, you can still stand up for yourself and you can still speak out about what's right and what's wrong, or all that sort of thing. But it does help you to realise exactly that you're talking about. You always have the choice to take something on or to let it go, to acknowledge that it's difficult and accept it and make a choice to do something else anyway.
Yeah, and then it gives you a ton of composure to deal with that situation, and composure allows you to not start bawling or to get angry in the outside the school and start screaming and yelling. I said to my dad recently after one of his little outbursts, I said, listen, mate, you're 74 years old. When has rage ever made a situation better? He was like, never.
Ouch.
Then why do it? You know, no one's coming and giving you a hug after you give them a spray. You know, one thinks you're not tough. I just think you're an asshole. You know, love my dad very much, but you know, like you were talking about this the other day. Like, have you noticed this transition in our parents? You know, as they've got older, and now we've sort of the ones educating them, and it's interesting because I feel, and it's a real generational thing. Like his generation, they still believe what they were taught in the 70s. I was like, yeah, but Dad, the universe knows a lot more. You need to update. You know, there's so much more that we know as a species than what you knew back then. So, well, I reckon we could probably wrap it up on that. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to throw in there?
Mindful thanks to you, Josh.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Glad we finally got
I know, we got
made
it happening right in the nick of time.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you guys all the best with the business and the upcoming projects and what have you.
Thank you. Come and play.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to add, have you guys heard of, I've just enrolled in a Stage Milk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Andrew Hurl. It's different setup. It's just submitting self-tapes. And I meant to say this before when we were talking about it, and you're 100% right, and I'm so glad that you guys exist, because acting, if you're not booking parts or even just auditioning regularly, you know, I'll use myself as an example. I exercise maybe 5 times a week. Like, exercise is a big part of my life. I don't act 5 times a week, and I fucking should be. And
the investment,
you've got, it's muscle. Like, you've got it, and every book tells you to do it, and every school tells you to do it, but it's so easy to drop it, you know. And when you've got something like that to prepare for, I think it's really, really great. And for someone to come in and be able to do not just one, but a collection and work all of those different muscles and what have you, spot on. Nice one, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Joshua.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.